Hey everybody, Robert with RC Archery. So this is video 2 of this week's episode of Rchery Vision. In this video we're going to be going over our tech tip segment for the week. We're going to be looking at torque tuning. Alright, so let's start out by talking about what torque tuning is. Some of you may have heard this in the past and some of you may have not. So torque tuning is a method to decrease the miss on target when we torque the bow. So anytime we're shooting our bow, there can be little variations in the grip pressures that we place into the grip. Maybe we're tired and it's at the end of a round, or maybe we're fresh and it's at the beginning of the round. We're a little bit more amped up if we're nervous for some reason. Something like that may be going on, and we'll change the tension that we put into the grip, and we'll change the torque that the riser also has as well. So torque tuning is for our bad shots, not our perfect shots, and it's a way to minimize our miss from target. So miss small, win big.
The difference between us, Allison, you want to lose small, I want to win big. I want to win big.
All right, so I mentioned before, there is 2 different methods that I use when I go to my torque tuning. One is going to be the length of our sight from the riser, so from here to here. If you have a target bow, most all sights on a target bow are going to have an adjustable bar here where we can change the distance in and out. And then the second one is going to be our arrow rest. A lot of the new arrow rests that you see out on the market are going to be able to adjust forward or backwards, and some of them even have an extra long mount that will come up behind the riser or go even further back closer to our string. Now there's different scenarios for when I would use one over the other. So let's say if the peep sight that we're using, it's not an interchangeable or adjustable aperture size on the inside of it. Let's say it's just a fixed size. In that case, adjusting the sight bar length is going to be primarily to match our scope housing with our peep. In a situation like that, you're going to be more limited to the arrow rest on the movement that you need to make in and out. Now me personally, I use a specialty archery peep, and I have an insert kit that comes with it that I can change these inserts out and make it different sizes, and I can adjust based off of where I want to put my sight bar the way that this looks on there. All right, so let's say we're in the same situation like me where I can adjust my peep sight insert or aperture to be able to make it the right size for no matter where I put the length of this sight bar and how it changes how my eye is seeing the scope housing size. In this case, I have 2 options and I can fully use them both and really fine tune them to how I need this bow to perform. When I'm torque tuning, if I notice that I need a shorter distance between the sight and my arrow rest, then I can either move this sight bar in or I can move the arrow rest in. Let's say I like where my arrow rest is at, I don't want to move it, or maybe I just don't have the adjustments or the slot here where I can move the arrow rest, then I'm going to be using only the sight. Or let's say I'm in an in-between zone. I've done this before on bows and I've gotten myself into a situation where I'm as far back as I can with this type of arrow rest and I'm as far out as I can with this type of sight. In this situation, I'm gonna have to get an adjustment bar and I'm gonna have to pull this back behind the tech riser. But I've done this in the tech bar where it puts it behind this riser, actually makes the distance between the sight and the arrow rest too long. In that situation, then I'm gonna have to shorten down the sight bar length. So that's why I call it a 2-stage torque tuning process, because you really have to fine tune and adjust both the sight and the arrow rest sometimes in order to achieve what you're wanting to do on target. Now when it comes to torque tuning, there's some important factors to look at. One, we don't want to torque the bow so badly it's gonna derail. Now, we never do that in a normal circumstance, so there's really not a huge need to torque it that badly. Normally what I'll do is I'll put a little bit more torque into the riser than what I normally would if for some reason I'm amped up and torquing the grip a little bit because my tension's there, or if I'm just really tired and I'm really getting relaxed in my shot and getting lazy in what I'm doing. Now you'll notice that the bow really doesn't move a whole lot when I'm torquing it, but what I'm also doing, each time I torque that bow, I'm gonna recenter my peep and my scope housing. And that's a big step that we need to take in this process, because if you don't recenter the peep or the scope housing together, then you're gonna miss left or right of target regardless of if you're torquing the bow or not. So it's gonna give you some false readings. It's gonna be really hard to track what you're doing. All right, so I've built up a scenario for us here. I'm gonna use the same shots that I took here, and I'm actually gonna go over different scenarios and what we would be looking at and what we would need to adjust. So for now, let's look at the arrow in the middle being a straight, perfect, normal grip shot. And then let's look at the arrow on the left being an arrow that we torque to the left with our grip, and the arrow on the right being an arrow that we torque to the right. Now, if we have a situation where the arrow is landing where we're torquing the bow, then that means that we need to increase the distance between the sight and the arrow rest. So that can either mean moving the sight out if there's adjustment on our sight bar, or moving the arrow rest back to where if we have adjustments there, we can move the arrow rest further back away from the riser. We're gonna repeat this process, and we're gonna keep doing this until we can shoot all 3 arrows and they land as close as we're capable of making them. Now, using the same set here on the arrows, let's reverse this and let's talk about it in a different way. Let's take a look at, again, the arrow in the middle being a normal, perfect shot. And then now let's look at the arrow that we have on the left. Let's say if we torque the bow to the right, meaning that our grip pressure is changing to where we're letting our hand roll the riser to the right a little bit. If that arrow hits to the left, so opposite of the way that we torque the bow, then that means that we need to move the arrow rest forward, or we need to move the sight in. So we're needing to decrease the radius in between the arrow rest and the sight. The same would be the arrow on the right side. That would be if we torque the bow to the left and the arrow hit to the right. All right, so you notice that I shot 3 arrows, and I talked about shooting one as a normal pressure on your grip, torquing one to the left and torquing one to the right. And the reason I'm doing that is because we want to look for patterns to develop. Those patterns are telling us that there wasn't something wrong with the alignment of our peep and our scope, there wasn't something wrong with our shot, the wind didn't carry the arrow, or something happened. If we torque the bow to the left and that arrow lands to the left, and we torque that bow to the right and that arrow still landed to the left, there may have been a problem with one of those shots, especially if our standard grip pressure lands to the right of those arrows. Stuff like that is a checks and balance process, and it's what we need to look at in order to make sure that we are effectively tuning our bows and we're not just chasing our tails. Distance-wise and what we're doing with this, on an indoor setup, normally I'll do this at 20 yards. On my outdoor setup, I'll usually go to 30. I don't normally go further than that, but I do know archers that do. It's really based on your skill level and the distance that you need to achieve what you're looking for. You can torque tune your bow and get everything hitting in something that's acceptable for you at a certain distance, then you're good to go. All right guys, this is video 2 of 3 in Rchery Vision episode 8. So again, this is a 3-part video series. I'm gonna have them coming out each day. The next one will be out tomorrow, so keep an eye out for that one on my channel. Set the alerts if you haven't already, and as always, subscribe to the channel, like the videos, and share them please. That does a lot of good to keep these in the eyes of other archers that may be going through the same problems as you, or may need some help from some of these videos. Appreciate y'all watching today. I'll see you soon.